Chapter 9. When the time came, God called his proper officers, and they proclaimed his presence, whereupon the people came to order. And God said, 2. Even as it was before the submersion, so shall it now be, and ye shall fill the same places, even as before, every one to the place provided. Nevertheless, from this time forth, all work in heaven and on earth shall be new, and as if nothing had been. Let my lords and their attendants and their ashars prepare for their departure, and from such other volunteers as have come into my kingdom, they shall receive as they desire, and be assigned to labor suited to them, whether it be with mortals or with spirits in the first resurrection. 3. And to my marshals, messengers, and asaphs, hear ye the word of your God, which is that ye proceed throughout Atmospheria, selecting and appropriating all suitable places for the spirits of the dead, and that ye apportion builders and workmen, and erect factories and schools and hospitals and nurseries and all other suitable places adapted to receiving those of the first resurrection, as is done in all atmospherian heavens. And all who are thus received shall be called Essenes for the first 5 years, but after that they shall be called Assaeans, signifying having separated from corporeal desire, being full residents of the S world. But those who will not become Assaeans, being the spirit of droop mortals and hard bound to the earth, shall be called Drujas, signifying the wandering spirits of darkness and of evil. And those who engraft themselves on mortals shall be called Fetals, signifying sucklings. And these names shall continue in heaven and on earth to the end of the world. 4. Wherein ye may perceive the fault of leniency of the gods and lords of old, be ye circumspect in these times, for nevermore shall the rod of water chasten the living earth. 5. When God thus completed all his commandments, and the people were ready to depart, the Essenars and the trumpeters sang and played a hymn adapted to the new heaven and the new earth. And when this was finished, Aph, son of Jehovah, spake, saying, 6. Behold, the light of the high heaven opens. Thy son, O Jehovah, longeth for a great labor. I go on a journey farther than 10,000 suns. Phaetisi, thy daughter, O Jehovah, and goddess of 1,000 worlds, hath set apart to join 2 corporeal stars in a far-off heaven, whereon 1,000 million shall be delivered into spirit life in a single day. With her, by thy will and power, O Jehovah, I go. But yet, let not these, thy gods and lords and all their hosts, surmise I will forget one single soul of all that are here. And when the next Dan appeareth, behold, I will return to them to enjoy a portion of their sweet love. Aph is done. 7. And now the chief descended and sat at the foot of the throne. And God, suffused with tears, came down and took his hand, saying, Behold, he who is greatest maketh himself least of all. Arise, O Aph, son of Jehovah, and crowned immortal God of the ark of Noah, son of the Almighty. Arise and go thy way. 8. So Aph rose up, and shaking hands with God and his lords, descended to the borders beyond the foot of the pillars of fire, and his host with him, being 10 million in number, where the proper persons had in readiness an ascending otivan with wings, wherein they all entered. 9. At a given signal, the otivan started upward, but toward the east, and swift as a shooting star, it sped forth, and presently disappeared in the distance. Chapter 10. Jehovah said, Neph, my son, God of earth, hear thou the voice of thy Creator. For as thou callest on me in thy sour hour of trial, so did I come to thee and deliver the earth and heaven through my son of the ark of Noah in Etheria. Remember now the upraised of Hautuan, heaven of darkness, in Uklu, in the firmament, for they are thine until the next Dan appeareth on the earth. 2. God said, I have heard thy voice, O Jehovah, but what shall thy servant do? Behold, Aph, thy ark son, hath left with the upraised children of darkness, gods and goddesses who transcend thy servant so far in wisdom and power that he scarce can look upon them. How then shall it be with me, thy servant? 3. Jehovah said, Nevertheless, the upraised children of darkness are thine own family, and the glory of thy house in heaven shall be the light thou shalt make manifest in them. Fear not, the gods and goddesses understand this matter. 4. Therefore, when thou hast put thy kingdom in order, and established the heaven of the earth in all its parts, and stationed messengers betwixt thy throne and the thrones of thy lords of the earth, behold, thou shalt leave thy vice God to rule in thy stead for a season, and thou shalt go to Hatuon, and in the Etherian forests, for thou shalt be expected of them. 5. God said, Thy will be done, O Father. I perceive thy wisdom and glory and justice. Now will I sojourn on my throne 1 year, and thou, my vice God, shalt receive me, while I go and visit my rebellious children in Uklu, where gods and goddesses are overseeing them. 6. The vice God said, Thy will be done, God of heaven and earth. So it came to pass that in 1 year's time God had established heaven in such good manner that he could control the affairs of angels and men into the way of everlasting life. 7. God informed his council, which consisted of 500,000 Etherians, men and women, of the words of Jehovah, adding thereunto 8. And for 1 year will I remain in Hautuon, that I may become known to them who I have risen. But at the end of that time I will return hither, and bring with me such new volunteers as Jehovah may command. 9. It was known in heaven that God would leave at the proper time, and, to honor him in Jehovah's name, his hosts from far and near, to the number of 10,000,000, came to see him depart. And when God saw them, he proclaimed a day of recreation, and the people mingled together, and especially to reconverse on the matter of the deliverance of earth and heaven, and the going down of Pan, as it had been. 10. On the following day, all hands being refreshed and assembled in order, according to the discipline of gods, God spake from the throne, saying, 11. Hear the words of your God, and rejoice in the founding of a new heaven. Be wise in heeding that which I shall utter, and make yourself steadfast in all proven things. Here are millions who stood by my side in the name of the Creator, in the days of darkness in heaven and earth. For 3,000 years our battle lasted, and from out of the darkness, behold, our prayers went up to him, who is over all and above all. 12. And your God said, Surely Jehovah will deliver, when the vortex mergeth into Hydan, and ye all repeated the same thing, and the unity of our souls' desires reached up to the Orion chiefs, Jehovah's mighty sons and daughters. 13. For as it is proven that a man in conflict with himself accomplisheth nothing, whilst he who is in harmony with himself is mighty, wherein he ruleth himself to a good purpose. Even so hath it been proven that the unity of many angels can, by force of their own wills, control the place and proceedings of a world. And by your faith in this matter with your God, ye became a star of faith in Jehovah, which is the mastering of all things to his glory. 14. And they who were without an all-highest in person were without power, and of no effect, save to build up discord to our proceedings. Whilst those who assumed to be gods and lords, but ignored Jehovah, were not sustained, for having nothing higher than themselves, they rose only to themselves. 15. Which is manifested on earth, even as it was in those days in heaven, boasting of good works or of good prayers, but housing themselves about with the earnings of others. Did not these false gods and false lords set up self and worship it, and the fruits of their inspiration and their slaves under them were the angels they sent to rule over mortals, for the glory of their philosophy, wherein mortals also soon said the same thing of themselves, which was, Behold, there is no God, nor Lord, or of wisdom in heaven and earth. 16. Whereby the doctrines of the false gods and lords overturned even their own kingdoms, changing heaven into Hada. But when the light of Jehovah came, ye and your God and lords were one with his voice. Wherefore ye have been preserved in victory. And now hath it come to pass that your God and lords have established a new heaven and new earth for the glory of the Father. And he who hath labored so long in your love now goeth to the other wing of the battle, where your brethren, toiling with those in darkness, will rejoice to hear of your fruitful labors. 17. Then God turned to his right and said to Eolate, vice god of Jehovah, because thou wert robbed of thy division of the earth, even whilst thou wert in good work, Jehovah hath bestowed thee well. Thou shalt therefore hold the triangle of the gods of heaven until thy God returneth. 18. Thereupon God hung the triangle of Eolate's neck, saying, in Jehovah's name, all hail, God of heaven and earth. The host of millions repeated, all hail, God of heaven and earth. 19. And God came down and sat on the foot of the throne, in the custom of gods. And he who hath been anointed came down and took his hand, saying, arise, O God, and go thy way. And God rose up, and the two, with their marshals and attendants, went down by the borders, at the line of the pillars of fire, where the proper persons had a ship with mantles and curtains in readiness, and God and his host, even 500,000 in number, enter the ship. 20. Meanwhile, the Essenars sang an appropriate anthem of glory to Jehovah the highest. 21. At a given signal, the ship started upward, amidst the applause of millions of angels assembled, and like a star it shot upward higher and higher, till it was seen no more. Chapter 11. The council of Horeb being still in session, God, that is, Elohate, ascended the throne, and the light of Jehovah fell upon God, so that he was well nigh obscured from sight. And the voice of Jehovah spake, saying, 2. Hear ye my voice, as by my presence and of mine own self I made each self, and gave thereto power of words. So am I in light manifest by soul words to my Ethereal host. As to the lords of earth, ye have provided Ashars, and above them Asaphs, and betwixt all my kingdoms allotted messengers. So shall ye also provide for barbarians, familiar spirits, who shall be subject to the order of the Ashars and their lords. 3. I create alive all men, whether Ihans or barbarians, and your labors shall be not alone with my chosen, whom it is easy to save, but with those also who know me not, and know not my worlds. For, besides those destroyed by the flood, behold, the earth is still covered over with men, women, and children. 4. In the time of Aph ye received volunteers from Oahspe in Etheria. Give them this matter in hand. 5. This was done, and they were divided up into groups, and the Corporeans having been already numbered by the angels of heaven, the Etherians were distributed accordingly. And these again selected and apportioned familiar spirits to abide with the barbarians. And these familiar spirits were the fathers and mothers and friends who had recently died, but still sojourned in the first resurrection. So the officers provided places on earth for these spirits and persuaded them to reappear before mortals in order to prove continued life. But the officers never showed themselves. 6. Jehovah hath said, provide ye the way, but cause the familiars to do the labor. Neither shall ye make a familiar of the spirit of a young man or a young woman, lest they become fetals. 7. So it came to pass that a new department of heaven and earth was opened and set on foot during the absence of Neph, and in 1 year the matter was in prosperity. 8. At the end of 1 year, God returned from the Hatuan colony, bringing with him 5 million volunteers, being of the third resurrection. And, it being known in Horeb when he would return, a great concourse of angels gathered together to receive him in honor, and to welcome the volunteers. 9. So that when God's Etherian star descended, the vice god, Eolate proclaimed a recreation of 10 days, which was to follow immediately after God should ascend the throne and regain his presence. And so, whilst the Esenars were singing, the star alighted, and the marshals and host of honor proceeded to the places and received God, who had once ascended to the throne, and saluted Eolate, son of Jehovah, saying, 10. By thy will and power, O Jehovah, thy son rejoiceth in the time of his proceeding. Eolate said, Welcome, God of heaven and earth, and he saluted with the sign of Jehovah's name, and was answered in like manner. 11. Without more ceremony, he took off the triangle of the gods and placed it on God's neck, saying, In Jehovah's name, receive thou the gift of the ancient gods. 12. Hardly had this been accomplished when the starship alighted in the floor of the Congress, before the council, and near the altar of Jehovah, and the 5,000,000 volunteers alighted, amidst the applause of the many millions assembled. 13. God, being reinstated, said, Let the marshals proclaim 10 days of recreation, for we shall account to our especial loves how we found matters in Hautuan and of the power of Jehovah manifested. Chapter 12. The voice of Jehovah spake through God, saying, Because a new heaven is established, and because the old had been raised up, let signs be manifested, whereby men and angels in aftertimes may know what had happened. For it shall come to pass in later days that men and angels may forget the flood and the purging of the earth. Bethink ye, O gods and goddesses, what shall be done? 2. Eolate spoke in behalf of the council, saying, What shall we do, O Jehovah? And Jehovah answered, saying, Because I come near the earth in its early days, and farther off as it groweth older, men will say, Alas, the folly of the ancients! For I gave fear and faith as an heritage when men were weak in judgment. But with the growth of wisdom I take away the fear and the substance of things not proven to the judgment. 3. Jehovah said, In Cosmon, men and angels shall ask for proofs. One will say, How was it possible to relate to the words spoken in the olden time? Another will say, How can it be proven that the old heaven was taken away? 4. Hear, therefore, the words of your Creator. And when one saith, Behold, in those days few men have the gifts of words and speech, answer ye him, saying, Even so was it in heaven, and because they had not words, they could not be made to understand. 5. And another shall say, The Creator ruleth in large matters, but not in the small. And another shall say, Because the angels come in Cosmon, so could they in the olden time. And ye shall answer them, saying, Who knoweth the plan for an earthquake, whether it be small or large, before Jehovah? Is he not ever present? And do not certain conditions bring certain results? And they will answer, Yeah. 6. Say ye, Give then a name to the highest cause beyond all research. And they will say, By the ancients called Jehovah. And they shall perceive that they have entangled themselves in a net. For if the condition of ignorance on earth begot ignorance in heaven, how could the light of heaven come afterward to the earth, save from above? Since then the light of heaven came from above, who should invent the wisdom of a flood to come upon the speech of nations? 7. Give them therefore words in heaven and words on earth, which are of matters of this nature, and make the sounds thereof sacred, so that it shall be proven in Japheth and Shem and Ham and Gautama, and in the heavens thereunto belonging. The voice of Jehovah ceased. 8. God said, Thou art all wisdom, O Jehovah. Now have I a place for the new volunteers come from Etheria. For this shall be their matter and business, with the familiars who dwell with the barbarians. So accordingly were they allotted. And they were enjoined to sing into mortals the song of the flood. And they thus established its history to endure forever on earth. Chapter 13. All things prospered in heaven for many years. Nor were there great wars on earth, nor famines, nor epidemics. And the lords of the earth had sufficient luis for all the faithists, so as to control Ihan marriages, to bring forth sons and daughters who would rejoice in heaven. 2. And as fast as they died on the earth, these angels were carried to heavenly places suited to them, where they were handed into the care of Asaphs and entered as Essenes. But the lords appointed no Lewis over the barbarians, and only commanded the Ashars to watch for their spirits in the hour of death, and, if possible, to bring them to the organic places of God in Horeb. And mostly they were so brought. This continued for many years. But, in a course of time, the familiar spirits aroused up the barbarians, and they began to have dreams and see visions, for their familiars talked to them during sleep. And when this became common, Jehovah said, 3. Behold, the time is come to appoint Lewis to abide with the barbarians. For herein will I reveal a great secret, which is that my chosen on earth cannot subdue it, for they are a harmless and defenseless people. Therefore have I created the barbarian wisely, for he shall drive away and destroy all evil beasts and serpents, and the forest shall fall down before him. 4. For this purpose the Lewis shall select marriages with the view of raising up great kings and queens. But since the olden time, the kings depended on the prophets of God for counsel, and thus were advised against killing anything I had created alive. They quarreled. So in this time of the new heaven ye shall permit the kings and queens to consult the spirits of the dead with the talents I have given them. 5. This was done also, and the barbarians were attended by familiar spirits, many of whom took upon themselves any name pleasant to the ear, some of them calling themselves God or Lord, or after the name of some great king of the olden time. And these familiars, being stupid, supposed themselves to be such persons. 6. The result of their stupid impressions was to inspire the barbarians to believe they were attended by gods and lords, or by the spirits of kings or queens. And so they held up their heads and began to think, for as it had been said by the gods of ancient times, some are led by flattery, some by self-conceit, some by duty, some by love of righteousness. But there are others who can be led to self-improvement by persuading them they are chosen especially by some god or lord, or the spirit of a renowned king or queen, to work wonders. 7. God said, there was a certain sick man who could not be cured by the physicians. So there came a foolish woman, seeing visions, and said to the sick man, tomorrow thou shalt be healed. God hath been trying thee, but thou hast proven thyself in soul, and thy God will withdraw the spell of thy infirmity. Behold, thy God standeth by thee. 8. Now on the following day the sick man put forth his own spirit, and rose up, and was well. Wherefore it hath been adjudged, even deceit may accomplish what truth could not. Suffer then the familiars to lead the barbarians on for a season, but be ye watchful at the proper time to appoint new spirits to be with them. 9. God said, instruct the lords that the time is now come to reveal to mortals, especially to the Ihans, the 7 tetrachs. For as the Ashers are withdrawn apace, so shall mortals advance apace. 10. Which is to say, these are the inheritances of all men born on the earth. Anash, which is the persistent stubbornness by word or thought. Zimah, wicked device. Ra, delight in being bad. Belial, worthlessness. Aven, vanity and self-conceit. Dibah, slander and reporting of evils. And Satan, to be a leader, and especially to the delight of the other 6 entities. 11. These are the members of the beast of all men and women under the sun. Nor is any one without them in some manner or degree. Go ye therefore to the lords, and say to them, Jehovah hath set the beginning of the resurrection through Aph, his son, chief of the ark of Noah, to lay the tetrachs on the shoulders of mortals. 12. The marshals of the council provided messengers who were at once sent down to the different divisions of earth. For the tetrachs were some of the words selected in heaven to be given as everlasting names, whereby in after ages the tribes of Faithists might be discovered, and they were given alike to the Faithists of Kortama, Japheth, Shem, and Ham, who were the sons of the ark of Noah, preserved on the earth in that day. For these words were provided in the Hebraic, Vedic, and Algonquin languages to be synonymous till the coming of the Cosman era.